All right, hey, we're plodding along in the book of Joshua. We're in chapter 20, and we're going to see some kind of interesting things here. So I'm kind of excited about that. While I was studying this, and you'll know the thought later maybe, but my mind went to, I lived on Joan Avenue, grew up there, and there was a little side porch that we had on our house, and it was probably about 3 feet off that back door. And so it was just kind of our way out to the backyard. And I'm probably 4 or 5 years old. My sister's out there with me, and I'm not sure what happened, but apparently she made me mad because I pushed her off that back porch. And I remember all of a sudden getting scared to death and running and just trying to find a place to hide, right? And best I remember, it was like the downspout. Which, I mean, I wasn't a skinny kid then, but I wasn't that skinny, right? So I'm trying to hide. You know, my mom's calling me. And I'm like, man, what am I going to do? You know, and I don't even remember the outcome of that. I just remember being scared and thinking that I'm going to get a whooping like I've never had before. And at some point, I should have thought, I hope my sister's all right. But that thought never entered my mind. But I tell you that because there are times when we try to run and hide from our troubles, aren't there? I mean, you know, we do something, maybe it wasn't even intentional, but we tend to run and we try to find those places. So I say all that to tell you that in this story of the people of God, we're going to see that he required cities to be built or established among the cities of Levi. Remember, Levi didn't get a territory, he got cities. And out of those cities, God in his sovereignty and his grace created what's called cities of refuge. And so we're going to see that today and see how it unfolds and see what it's about. Because it's a powerful reminder, really. I mean, the more I studied it, when I first thought, that's kind of cool. But the more you look at it, I can't wait to share with you some of the great things that there are that come out of that story. So we've been in the book of Joshua, and we're just kind of hitting the high points. Because a lot of it, honestly, right, is just, you know, and they conquered this land, and they established this, and here's their boundaries, and here's who got what. But there are woven within that book of Joshua some incredible principles that we've been gathering. And one of the things that we've realized is that for them, crossing the Jordan into the promised land was God giving them their blessing and their land and the seed, kind of build their nation. And so for you and me, that translates, because the Old Testament was written, it's history, it's true, and it's powerful, and we learn so much from it, but it was written for our example. And so some of that is like what we call metaphor. And so we can identify that when they were told to cross that Jordan by faith, go into the promised land, there would still be enemy there. And their job was, it's theirs, but you have to take the land. And so this is what God has done for us. He has given us and replaced our heart of stone with a heart of flesh. And now our goal is to take that heart of ours that he has given us power over the sin through his blood. We've been given the penalty of that sin is gone. The power of that sin is gone. It's up to me. He's assured me the victory. There will come a day in my life when the presence of sin is gone. And so that while that is at death, sin should be being reduced in our life on a constant basis. And this is the issue that you and I have to deal with, this whole thing called just sin. And so we see this as you and me having our life, so to speak, and then realizing, okay, well, I've still got some attitude here, or I've got some habits here, right? And those kind of things that go on. And my job and your job is to put a chokehold on all of those sins. Truly, the goal of the church is that you and I would be holy. Not just for holy's sake, but because it's good for us. And it's what God requires of us, that we be holy, that whoever claims to be in Jesus should look like him. And so this story that we're seeing here is how that happens, right? So there's the taking of the land, and that is that they're going to conquer it. There's the purging of the land, getting the sin out of it. There's going to be where they dwell in there, and they thrive in that, and they find themselves blessed in that. And so we've talked about the fact that you and me can get so far into our life where we kind of get comfortable. We got rid of the big sins, right? You know, big ones are gone, so now it's just these little ones. Like they don't matter. But isn't it the little sins that sometimes trip us up more than anything? Isn't it sometimes because we can't control our mouth and we say one thing that we shouldn't say, and then it wrecks a week, it wrecks a relationship, right? I mean, it's just that one thing. If we could just channel that. And so we have to put a chokehold on that. And there's so many. The tongue is one of the biggest small things that we do with that. A lot of it's attitude. A lot of it's habits, and these are the things that we're going to talk about. And so uh, I've titled this "The Provisions and Promises of God," and I just want us to see this. And the first one is that God. I mean, the overall theme is just the faithfulness of God. God gave them a refuge. Let's read this. Let's get into it. It should be a quick, easy movement right now. But it says, chapter 20. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, designate the cities of refuge, of which I spoke to you through Moses." Now that was 40 years ago that he did that, but that's how God operates. "So that the one who commits manslaughter by killing a person unintentionally, without premeditation, may flee there, and they shall become your refuge from the avenger of blood. Then he shall flee to one of these cities, and shall stand at the entrance and gate of the city, and state his case in the presence of elders of that city, and they shall receive him into the city to them, and give him a place, so that he may remain among them. Now if the avenger of God pursues them, then they are not to hand the one who committed manslaughter over to him, since he struck his neighbor without premeditation, and did not hate him previously. And he shall remain in that city until he stands before the congregation for judgment, until the death of the one who is high priest in those days. Then he shall return to his own city and his own house, to the city from which he fled." So they set apart Kadesh and Galilee, Naphtali. He's going to list the cities that they spread out. Now, let me read to you in, if I can get there. Exodus chapter 35 is kind of a broader aspect of this. This is what he said, the things that Moses told you. So hang with me, and then we'll catch some conversation about it. He says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, When you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall select for yourselves cities to be your cities of refuge, so that the one who commits manslaughter by killing a person unintentionally may flee there. The city shall serve you as a refuge from the avenger, so the one who commits manslaughter does not die until he stands before the congregation for trial. So the cities which you are to provide shall be 6 cities of refuge for you. You shall provide 3 cities across the Jordan, and 3 cities in the land of Canaan, and they are to be cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall do that." Now, he says this. "These are for the stranger and the foreign resident among them, so that anyone who kills a person unintentionally may flee there. But if he struck him with an iron object so that he died, he's a murderer," right? So, I accidentally hit you with this iron. That doesn't pass. And then he says, "If I strike him with a stone by the hand," so I picked up a stone and I hit somebody in the head, I can't go, "I didn't mean to." And he says, "Or if he struck him with a wooden object, he is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death. The blood avenger himself shall put the murderer to death. He himself shall put him to death when he meets him. Now, if he punished him in hatred, or he threw something at him with malicious intent, as a result he died, or if he struck him with his hand with hostility as a result of it, the one who struck him must be put to death." You can't even just use your hand if there's an anger involved. "But if he pushed him suddenly, without hostility, and threw any object at him without malicious intent, or had any deadly stone, and without looking, he dropped it on him so that he died, while he was not his enemy, nor was he seeking to harm him, then the congregation shall judge between the one who fatally struck the victim and the blood avenger in accordance with these congregations." Now, I know that's a lot of stuff, but let's just have this conversation. So we're now settled in all these towns, and I come along and I accidentally, hurt Mike, and by virtue of just an accident, it wasn't like he and I got in a fight, we disagreed about, football or something, and so I'm just mad. It's just, he dies by my hand, but I didn't do anything about it. His relatives are going to rise up, just like what happens, right? You start hurting my kid, I don't care who's at fault, I'm coming after you, right? I mean, that's kind of what happens, right? And so there's the instinct, and God knows this. That's the instinct of human nature. you're not gonna hurt my brother, I'm gonna kill you, right? And so now they're coming after me. And these cities were within a day's journey. So if I killed somebody, knowing what's gonna happen, accidentally did so, if I can just make it to a city, I'm safe. And so what happens in that city is I stand before the city gates, and I plead my case. I explain what happened. The congregation, that is that city, so the avenger can come. The person that's just going to say, "I'm coming after you," they can come, but they can't get inside that city. I'm safe there. I pled my case, And then the congregation decides whether I'm innocent or guilty. And if they've decided that I am innocent, then I can stay in that city. And as long as I stay inside the walls of that city, can't nobody touch me. It's just base, it's home. I can't leave until the priest dies. It's a strange thing, really, when you think about it. But when you think about what's going on there, it's just the grace of God and how He covers us, right? And this is true of every area of your life and my life. So think about it with me, because this is really the study. This is the story of the Passover. That's all this is, right? If you hide, right? Listen, when that death angel's coming, right? The blood avenger's coming in Egypt. Remember that? And so when he's coming, he says, now here's what I need you to do. I need you to get within inside your house. I need you to sacrifice an animal. I need you to put that blood on the doorpost. And when I come, the avenger of blood comes and he sees the blood, he will pass over. Now, you're trying to figure out how does this work with all of this? Well, so see, we have a great high priest who gave himself up for us that we might be delivered from our sin. And so these priests, it was like I'm safe because here's the thing. There's what we call the Imago Dei, right? A murder happened. And there's death, right? And that's listen, when that happens, it's a grievous thing. Humanity is precious. Sometimes I think we miss this, right? All of us were made now not all of us are children of God, but all of us are made in the image of God. Make sense? So the worst, most vile person you can think of bears the mark of Christ, of Jesus, of God on him, right? The Imago Dei. You were made in His image and His likeness. And so all death is a grievous thing to God. And so even if it's innocent, it's a grievous thing. And so this is what they did. Now, so here's what we discover from this is how God is a refuge, because He gave the high priest as that substitute. So I'm covered, and the avenger can't get me until life for life. So since the high priest is the one that was kind of in charge of the city, they were Levite cities, remember? So there's households of priests that are in that place. And so when they come in there, then you're covered. And then once a death for death has happened, a substitute, then you're free and the avenger's satisfied. Kind of crazy when you think about that. But that's the principle of what takes place. So what do we find out of this? Well, I mean, we find that I'm grateful that God has given us a provision of refuge. That even in the midst of that my heart, Christ's home, there's still sin there. Some of it's, I guess all sin is somewhat intentional, but some of it's unintentional, right? I mean, words can escape out, and you don't know the wounding of it until they come out, and then you realize, man, that was brutal, right? And I'm grateful that God does not hold me accountable for that. He's already paid for all of it, but there's just this refuge. There's this grace that God has given to us. And I just think it's important for us to see that and to understand that this passage, like I say, I find it kind of fascinating just how God does that. So then we come to Joshua 21, and we pick up another. So the rest of that was dividing of the land and all of that. And these are the words I want us to kind of dwell on today. I wasn't even planning on talking about the refuge until I looked at this, but this morning I'm just reading through it again. I thought, man, that's just powerful. So God is faithful. First thing He gives us is that He gives us a refuge. The second thing, and there's really, it's just, we'll see it in 43, 44, and 45. Here's what it says. So they've already settled all the land. Then He says this. So the Lord God gave Israel all the land which He had sworn to give their fathers, and they took possession of it and lived in it. He gave them everything, all the possessions. He fulfilled every promise. Look what it says. And the Lord gave them rest on every side in accordance with everything that He had sworn to their fathers, and not one of their enemies stood before them. The Lord handed all their enemies over to them. Not one of the good promises which the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed, and everything came to pass. And when you think about the promises, I feel like I'm a broken record, but God's just driving this in my own life. God is faithful. If He says He's going to do it, He's going to do it. In my studies in Luke in the mornings, as we're walking through that, and we're seeing the prophecies of John the Baptist and his birth, and of Jesus and his birth, and we're seeing these things, and you go back in history and realize that Isaiah had said something 700 years before that was going to happen, and it happened just like he said. And when you see where Jesus, who was from Nazareth but was born in Bethlehem to fulfill a promise that God had made 700 years before, caused Tiberius Caesar to decide he's going to create a census so that he could get there, so they could do that. He's faithful to if he says it, it's done. And that's why it's so important that you and I listen. You could get off a lot of meds if you would buy into this understanding that if God says it, it's settled. You don't even have to believe it. Remember that old phrase, God said it, I believe it, and that settles it? No. God said it, that settles it. Whether you believe it or not, it's up to you, right? This is true, and you and I need to know that. And so if God says all things work together for good to those that love him and are called according to his purpose, we buy into that. You know what that does? This terrible thing comes in my life, and I'm going, all right, I hate this. And I'm not blaming anybody on this, but I know this. God's going to take what is a deficit, and he'll turn it into an asset, right? That doesn't mean the pain's going to go away. Doesn't mean the sadness or whatever's happened is going to go away. It just simply means that he will weave this together for his good. I can go to sleep at night knowing that, right? These are the things, if you and me study the promises of God, then we're going to see how faithful he is. That not one of them. He does not break a promise at all. And so this is the first thing, is that he gave them all the possessions, right? He all the possessions that he gave, he says, sworn to give to their fathers, and they took possession of it. He gave it to them. So here's just a little reminder. He has blessed you with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. He adopted you. He accepted you. He forgave you. He's graced you. He's put his spirit within you, and he's given you an inheritance of home. Now, if we go back to just that one word, forgiveness. You possess forgiveness, right? You stand in forgiveness. There is now, therefore, no condemnation in Christ Jesus. You and me, and I don't want to split hairs here, but you and me don't have to ask forgiveness anymore when we sin. We simply confess and agree that what we just did was sin. He's already forgiven us. The blood of his son constantly cleanses us from all sin. I'm always standing under the flood of forgiveness. The shower of forgiveness is always on me. If we don't know that, guilt will wear us out. And that's what Satan wants us to know, right? Now, how many people do you know spend a lifetime in that kind of stuff? And they're trying to overcome and pay back what they can't pay back. It's done. God has forgiven. And if he's forgiven it, he's forgotten it. Isn't that what he says? I'm going to throw it in the depth of the sea, and I'm going to remember it no more. I'm going to take that sin of yours, I'm going to put it on a train heading east, and I ain't never going to see it anymore. It's powerful when you think about that. And so you possess that. The world doesn't. The world is standing condemned in their sinfulness, and they will reap the wrath of God. Not you and me. I'm going to walk in that possession. There's some freedom there. Because I'm a paranoid guy, man. I'm a people pleaser at heart. And if I do something wrong, and it's like, I just feel like all of a sudden I'm going to get buried underneath something. And I have to remember that I can't fix everything around me. I'm going to be all right. And if you're either going to be gracious or you're not, but he's already forgiven me. And I wish you would, but I can't make it. Right? I mean, these are the things that we look at. Philippians 4:19, right? My God shall supply all your needs according to his riches in Christ Jesus. Now, I have a lot of needs. You have a lot of needs? Most of those probably fall in the line of like greeds or wants or all of that. But there's not one need that I have that he just hasn't met. Not one. It's important that you and I know that. That frees me from worrying, right? If you knew you had an endless amount of currency, you would live life differently, wouldn't you? I mean, I'm assuming I would. I have that in Christ. Every need I have. Therefore, I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to wonder about. I mean, right now, man, if I decide, hey, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I believe the Lord's called me to do, and I start doing those things, I don't have to wonder, well, how's it going to happen? Where the provision is going to come from? Where the need's going to happen to do that? I can trust that He's going to meet that need. This is what it means. They had every possession. He reminds them, you are eating food from gardens and trees and vineyards you didn't plant. And you're living in houses you didn't have to sweat and build. He gave them everything. This is just a powerful truth there. And then it says this, and the Lord gave them rest on every side. All their enemies are routed, and they're either routed, dead, or subdued. Right? That was the only choice. They either were routed and they fled and they're no longer messing with you, or they're laying around here dead and you're going to bury them, or now they're your prisoners and you own them. Remember, the ones that did stay, they become slaves to Israel. That was what took place. And so He just gave them rest. That's just peace. And we just finished with this one. Not one, I love this verse. I'm going to read it again. Not one of the good promises which the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. Every one came to pass. He's a good God. And that's powerful truth. I'm done preaching. I just, pausing for a minute because that verse is so powerful. I'm going to. Not one of the good promises that the Lord gave to Israel failed. All of them came to pass. I don't know if you have a promise book, and some of those aren't worth having because not every promise in the Scripture is for you. Some are specifically to an individual, and we have to see how that works. But those promises that are ours, you ought to know what they are. If I were you, I'd get a book of promises, and I'd write the ones down that I knew were for me, and I'd latch hold of them. I've probably got about 8 or 9 of them that they just play in my head all day long, right? It's easy to worry about future when you get to a certain age and you're thinking, man, should I have saved a little more? Should I have invested a little more? But as they say, it is what it is, right? And so if I don't know that my God will meet all my needs, there's this thought that if something happens to me tomorrow, I will be a failure as a husband to Tammy because she's provided for, but I'd like for her to be like doubly so. I sleep because I know that I can't mess that up, right? That's all we have. If we want this peace that He promises, it comes from that. And so, man, I'm just encouraging you today to just know that He's faithful. His promises are sure. I'm going to see my friends who are in heaven one day. I'm going to see my mom, see my dad. I like those thoughts. I do. I don't know if that matters to you. It matters to me. When I did a funeral the other day for Lee, she's just a few burial plots down from my mom and dad. And so when I finished her funeral or ceremony, I went over and just kind of stood there, Tammy and I did. I know they're not there. But it's just something comfortable about looking down at that marker and seeing a birth date and a death date and go, but that's not the last I've seen them. There's some comfort in that. It's important that you and I know that. There's some truths, some of you have children who aren't walking with the Lord. And while it's not the Proverbs, I'm trying not to teach, I'm to preach, but so in the Proverbs, we tend to try to make those promises, but they're principles, if you can understand the difference of what I'm telling you. The principle is that if I keep pouring righteousness and truth into my kids' life and they see it and they hear it, see it from me and they hear it from me, they will return to that. They can't help it because it's in their DNA. They're not their biological DNA, but their emotional DNA. And so those habits, they come back out. Some of us need to see that from time to time, don't we? And just be reminded it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I'm going to shut up because I'm done. And when I'm done, I'm done. I mean, I don't want to, we don't have a time limit. So I just wanted to share that with you today. Anybody got anything to say before we hear about the goodness of God on our way out? Isn't that such a great song?
It stays on my mind constantly, and I played it at my building
Yep,
when we were having Bible study and something like that,
yep.
and I'll just play that song, and everybody just really loves
That's all they got. Yeah, I love that song
But
too.
he is so good, so
Yeah.
good. And when you really listen to the words and everything,
Yep. It's so good. And you can't mess it up. That was the whole story we looked at so far, right? I mean, they're in Egypt. He delivers them. They whine and complain when they stand before the Red Sea. Why'd you bring us here? Could have been back there. Got parts of the waters they go across. Then they're able to take the promised land, send the spies in. They messed that whole thing up. Now 40 years they're wandering around. Yet none of that did God go, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna fry you all. He said, no, all of you won't see it, but your kids gonna see it. And so he was faithful, and they reached the promise. Yours and my life. When we give our life to Him, they're in His hands, and they're in good hands.
my version, and
Yes.
it's not one of all the Lord's good promises.
All the Lord's good promises. I know. I love that phrase. Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. Not one.